Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, folks. We have 30 minutes to enlighten our audience about IoT, both the challenges and the opportunities. And I'm going to kick it off first, and I'm going to go to Nick after he finishes his water drinking. And Nick, you've been around on this, industry for a while, and IoT has been changing. I'm not saying you're old, don't worry. I'm just saying you have a lot of experience, right? So IoT is changing, right? And we have seen a lot happening. So what new use cases do you think is driving the industry at the moment?
So I'm going to use just two examples. The question is, how is it changing? One of the ways in which it's changing, and it will change, I think, a lot more in 2024, is that the use cases will get bigger. So I'm going to use two examples, and examples with incredible ROI, so business outcomes. Just a little bit of background. We're a UK-based MVNO. One of the things that we do is we work very much on the device. We optimize the device, the firmware. In fact, we often work on that for 2 years before we actually do connectivity. And the goal being is to deliver more than 99.5% connectivity to every device in every place all the time. So we do an SLA, for instance. We often sign SLAs at greater than 99.5% for global estates. So with that as a background, I want to use two examples. The first one is actually up for one of your MEFI awards. I know you've already chosen, so I can't influence the jury. So, and it's up for a GLOMO as well. And it is an area where you talk about Internet of Things. In this case, the things are cattle. So a little bit of background, and in case you're not fully familiar with the cattle industry, which I wasn't. There are about 250, I think it's 250 million cattle just in the US, so almost as many as people, and the US is 10% of the global market. The number one killer of cattle is something called BRD, bovine respiratory disease, which is basically pneumonia.
Okay.
So 1% of all cattle in the world die of pneumonia. You can't diagnose, I had to learn all this when these guys came to us. You can't diagnose it because when a cow gets sick, cow gets sick, what they do is they sort of withdraw into the herd. They hide because of predator-prey dynamics.
Okay.
And a typical herd is 500. So often, up until now, amazingly, cowboys literally sat on horses looking at cattle, trying to spot sick cattle. That's actually what the cowboys were doing, not just, and you can't spot them because they go into the middle. And so only 58% of cases are diagnosed, and by which time the cow is either going to die or the yield will be really low. So that's the problem. If you take the cost just in North America, it's $1 billion a year of lost meat revenue, frankly, and US is 10%. So it's a $10 billion a year global problem, relying on people looking at 500 animals. So we worked with a couple of vets from Kansas who said that the way to do it is to use advanced algorithms to actually track behavior of cows and look for, it's a bit like security. Jimmy, it's a bit like unusual behavior compared to how they normally behave. So tracking the individual behavior of every head of cattle in terms of their normal movements, how often they eat, how often they drink, et cetera, et cetera. And it needed custom hardware in terms of sensors created. So cut to the chase, we created the hardware, created the sensors, and you also, by the way, need 100% connectivity in rural, in this case, America. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have to be able to connect, you have to have connectivity because it's not where the people are, it's where the people aren't. Anyway, the bottom line is the reason they're up for an award is that they've cracked the algorithm and they've increased the detection rate by about 18%. And most importantly, they've pulled it forward 7 days, which means you can treat it. So basically, these guys are just rolling out now. We talk about field trials, literally field trials, muddy boot stuff, and they are making a big bite into a $10 billion problem.
Wow.
And the guy, one of the two founders, is here. He'll be at the, anyway, he's here, and he's up for one of 2 awards. We'll see how he gets on. So from that to another one, I'll switch from cows to something completely different, just briefly on Amazon. I do a podcast series, and both of these are on a podcast. If anyone's interested in more information. But Amazon are very ambitious. They're trying to own every door in the world. It's their words, not mine.
Is that what it's saying? They want to own
every door. And because
That's
Amazon
good
Prime,
branding, huh?
Amazon Prime first-time delivery is 84%. And so they want to get it up to about 92, 93. So they're putting technology in the door buzzer, like the Ring doorbell, but more advanced stuff, to get secure access. And then they're franchising that technology to every other parcel delivery company in the world. Because you don't just want Amazon to be able to have secure access, you want everyone. So they're basically trying to own every door in the world. That's been live now for about 2 years. And what's interesting about them is that they're using AI to analyze the operational network level data to go from reactive to proactive to preemptive. So there's a problem, I'll fix it, connectivity in this case. Or there's reactive, no, there is a problem, please fix it. Reactive, there's a problem, I fixed it. Proactive is there's going to be a problem based on predictive analytics at deep network level. I'm going to switch the IMSI before there's a problem. And again, they talk about that on the podcast. So 2 very different projects, billions of dollars in return. And I think that's what's different. We're not talking a few devices. We're talking mainstream business process optimization in everything from cows to doors, essentially.
Yeah.
So there's 2 examples.
Wow, I mean, 2 very diverse, I would say, use cases that you shared with us, Nick. You, from cows up in the fields and making sure they're staying healthy, to losing our identity because somebody else owns our doorbell and our doors. I mean, I'm putting it quite bluntly there, but you know what I'm talking about. And these are just 2 examples of IoT. And we say the possibilities with IoT are infinite. It's truly infinite because we can put sensors or anything. But when it comes to the technology behind it, it's not as straightforward. And technological innovations, yeah, they're growing quite fast, and you know it's moving along. But Roberta, where are you seeing the technological advances coming and being in the past 2 years? Where have you?
So I think thanks, Nasir. I think over the last 2 years, particularly in the IoT space, I think we've been hoping for more from 5G. We've been hoping that there would be ubiquitous coverage there, the performance would have been rolled out across, and it hasn't happened maybe at the speed we would have wanted it to.
Yeah.
And then also in addition to that, eSIM was another one that, and obviously we're just getting the relevant standards now to be able to implement and move forward with that. So Security, who I work for, have developed a core software-defined mobile network. So I've come from, in the last 2 years, moved into the mobile space. I was working in an infrastructure company that provided infrastructure and connectivity, fixed line, SD-WAN services. And we learned so much from the hyperscales. We learned from the fact that customers are now looking for that self-service, that mass customization, the ability to be able to consume in that model, the same as the hyperscale, and that's where we need to get to with the IoT space. So our aim is to bring forward this solution that enables people to control everything themselves and be able to self-serve themselves as part of it. And we're seeing that with things like eSIM and moving to iSIM, where the MNOs are letting go the customers, or MVNOs, the customers are able to provision themselves.
So you touched a very good point right there, Roberta, especially learning from hyperscalers. Now, end of last year at MEF, we do once monthly an IoT working group, and on that working group, I know Shri and Jimmy were part of that working group, and we talked about how to make money with IoT, remember? And one of the key elements is learn from the hyperscalers and self-survey, right? So you touched a very good point. If we want some return on investment, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to look at how others are making money out there and mirror some of that. But that brings me to the next big point, which is what do we do with security and regulations? Because this proliferation of massive, explosion of devices out there, and it's only going to grow. So Jimmy, I'm going to come to you because you're an in-house security expert. At least I tell him he is. So where do you see we're moving towards on this, and what are the key things and challenges we should be aware of?
I think there's a lot there, and sort of echo what Roberta said. You need to be, the thing about security, you do need security. It's paramount. Obviously, I'm going to say that from my job title. But it needs to be balanced, I think, because the opportunity and the security need to be balanced together. So we need to get to a position where the connectivity offerings are actually as flexible as the applications you might be able to build on AWS and Azure. Because if we think about it, that you can get any device made in somewhere. You can get any application made, and then the part in the middle, the most important part that's touching both sides, that's opaque. People can't see what it can do. So what we think we need to do is we need to utilize that in two ways. We need to open it up. We need to, if technology was no object, what would your connectivity do to you? That's what we're using as a line at Zariat. We're trying to encourage people to ask. The problem you have is people don't see the advantages and the tools that you can put into telecoms. And we're trying to open that, and we've got a raft of partners, an ecosystem partners, who we're bringing together to be able to deliver that, and the security as well. In fact, we did a big PR this morning with Crypto Quantique, who do, their whole point is to secure the device to the communication and also make administration and management very simple, so you can just push it through to the cloud providers very, very simply. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot there. What concerns me a lot is people are very interested in that, and they're very interested in security as well, but we see the pickup in security being quite low. And I think that's because people don't want to pay for security. They want to be able to say, what's the next new shiny thing to move on their digital transformation or to sell something to somebody. That's going to change in the next few months with the PSTI bill in the UK and the Radio Equipment Directive, Article 3, that makes me sound boring. They're coming in as legislation in Europe and the UK, and they're basically a stick to beat people with. I don't think they go, if you haven't done enough to adhere to those standards, by the way, then you're not doing a very good job on your IoT anyway. But that's coming through. So. And what I do like about the US have got a slightly different way of doing it. They have the US Cyber Security Mark, I'm sure you'll know, where they're using it as a carrot so that you can advertise your solution as being secure. I think that's probably a nice way to do it because that does the balance for you. It gives you the business advantage as well as giving you the security.
Wow, it is indeed a lot. And I think the main challenge when it comes to security is people are unaware or unfamiliar, and they hear this is a new standard, and unless you're in the industry and you understand it, it just goes over your head, or you ask somebody to do something for you, and before you know it, you're in a blip trouble, and you don't know where you're going to be. But I want to go now to Shri, because you come from a background in what you guys do at Somos, and you might be wondering why a numbers company, and I'm just generalizing, right? Because you know XConnect and someone's owned XConnect, and you do a lot around identity, right? And when it comes, yeah, exactly. So what does identity have to do with IoT? Well, let me tell you, all those devices, the millions of devices out there, each one of them have an identity. So if you're wondering where to go next in terms of business because your messaging revenue is shrinking, hint, hint, so, and Shri, where are the regulations? Because you're based in the US, and what's happening in the US? And where this whole identity question comes into place?
Yeah, so the first thing that when people talk of security is you have to know what you're securing. So the concept of identity is very fundamental to security. And so that's the reason why Somos is in it, because we are really, we view numbers as identifiers, and so we use that to, along with the life cycle of those identities, actually help figure out fraud in telecom, like in messaging, as well as security issues in IoT devices. So that is where we come from, and it's becoming more and more apparent because just like Jimmy mentioned, people don't want to pay for security, but they are indirectly paying for it because as an enterprise, the cybersecurity insurance rates have been growing at about 30% a year. So they may say that they don't want to pay for security, but they're paying it in insurance premiums. So you might as well make sure that you're securing your devices, because any breach through IoT or through a connected device is about $9.4 million. That's the cost of a breach. So this was actual figures released last year. So knowing that you're paying a higher premium, and if there is a breach, it's going to cost you 9.4 and potential reputational damage and so on, you might as well put in the effort to make sure your devices are secure, right? That's the first thing. And there is a huge effort within the US government to actually come up with basic standards for this. And the main reason was, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed a couple of years ago. So $1 trillion bills, budgetary bills, are like once in a lifetime for us, right? Maybe our kids and grandkids might see something larger, but for us, this is a big deal. And as part of that, they specified that the infrastructure needs to be modern, right? And the whole definition of modern infrastructure is something that's been widely debated, and basically they're saying it needs to be connected, it needs to be monitorable, it needs to be securable, and so on. And as part of that, there are a lot of different, there's been some work from the National Institute of Standards and Technology who've created a set of guidelines around this. And the next step beyond that is that the FCC came out in September, October of last year with a notice of public rulemaking, where they said we need to create a cyber labeling program. What that is just like when we buy a processed food product, you see a nutrition label that says what are the ingredients within it. The same concept wants to be extended to all these devices, so that a consumer can look at a device and say, oh, these are the components within it, this is the serviceability of that, which means I know I'm going to get software updates or firmware updates for the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. And it's easier to figure out what the warranty around those devices are. So this is all essential for consumers, for enterprises, so that gives us a sense of comfort that we are buying something that has the right security stance, right? So this is something that was done September, October of last year. It created a lot of buzz in the industry because a lot of associations want to create and obviously want to support this program. And they have put in a lot of comments back to the FCC about what they want to do. And potentially this could become an order sometime later this year, in which case we'll start to see like a step change in the industry where manufacturers will have to actually put a QR code or some kind of label that says this is what is actually the actual software inside, what are the security issues, and what is called a software bill of materials, which says, okay, these are all the components within it and how it's going to be maintained.
What do you, before I go to my next question, there's something that popped into my head that I have to ask, Sri. Do you think this was done to safeguard the industry and when it comes to the devices, the bill of materials and the device of what's inside, or was it to control where the materials are coming from? Or does it matter?
So,
Sri, or anybody else on the panel, you're welcome to.
yeah, I think at some level there is the notion that this will actually separate or give more visibility to the supply chain to say, oh, this part came from a country like from Russia or so on, and then you can say, okay, I want to blacklist that device because I don't trust it, right? That was the original thought, but I think they went beyond, because when you look at the software bill of materials, a good portion of most modern software uses a lot of open source components, and open source components have a lot of vulnerabilities in them. And there are now public databases where you can go consult, which basically lists out all of those so-called issues with the software. So with the software bill of materials, you can actually consult that and say, oh, I know that there is this problem. Like, for instance, the solar winds issue that happened a few years ago, and there's another famous one called Log4j. This happened in 2015, and I believe there are 30% of devices that still have the same issue, that are still out there in the wild.
Well, we can have a session just about that, but I want to come to you, Gabriel, and talk a little bit about the trends. What do we see the main trends are within IoT that our audience should be aware and familiar with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was going to the event this morning thinking that my first Mobile World Congress was 10 years ago. And I'm not saying that because I'm getting old, but 10 years ago we were talking about 3G. People had no idea about IoT and etc. And today when you go to the event, you can see a lot of different types of technologies working together. So here we can split the answer in three big blocks. So on the hardware side, we do see people investing a lot in edge computing. So that's the ability to process data close to the device. When you move from the device to the connectivity, so 5G, everyone is talking about 5G. The next panel, the guys will touch about this, 5G standalone, no standalone. So this is becoming part of the reality. We also have low power wide area, so narrowband IoT. We have Cat-M. We are talking about Cat-1Bs. So, I mean, we need to be aware about that. Another technology coming up is non-terrestrial networks. So it's the ability to converge cellular network and satellite network in the same environment. So you can have the flexibility to change from one to other. We are talking a lot about security. Of course, this is one of the main concerns. But then when you move from the connectivity to the application, so most of the applications are running now in the cloud. So we have a huge amount of data to be managed, to be treated. So what can we do with this data? And Nick brought an important part. So IoT and artificial intelligence are becoming friends. So this is really nice because, okay, we are here. We use it to work in a reactive way. But today, with the platform, getting the right data, we can give the right insights to customers. So we can predict what will happen. And then, with these insights, customers can, for example, optimize their operational part. They can understand if what they are doing makes sense or not. So there are a lot of benefits that all of these technologies, working together, can bring to the market.
Like we were saying earlier, the possibilities are infinite, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's the reality when it comes to the Internet of Things. Now, I was interviewed earlier today by MEF Radio. If you don't know about MEF Radio, you should check it out. It's wonderful. It's a lot of good information. And then one of the questions was, is IoT done? I mean, it's been around for a long time, and what is it a buzzword that flew? And we are over the curve, the hype curve. Okay, but my answer to this was, and this is my personal answer, and I would like to understand from the panel as well. I don't think IoT has even get started to the level we envisioned in the industry of where we can achieve. And you mentioned, Gabriel, AI. Now, like IoT, AI has been around for a very long time. Now, why all of a sudden AI has become such an overhyped, I wouldn't say commodity yet, but we're moving. It's because of ChatGPT and the likes and the bots, right? That everybody understands what AI can help, but that's just a language model. The AI that we're talking to when it comes to IoT is more advanced. We're talking about predictive modeling. We're talking about proactive information, right? So what did we learn? What did we learn in the past 20-odd years that IoT has been around? It might have not been called IoT, but it's been around for a long time. So Nick, what do you think we learned?
Well, clearly we learned a lot, but maybe I'll give a framework for the answer, because that's a really big question you're asking. And it was called M2M.
Yeah.
If you look at from a cellular point of view, cellular is only 13% of connectivity. If you look from a cellular point of view, it was basically from the operator out. So the proprietary SIM, the lock, the operator chose the roaming connection. So the operator controlled the game, if you like, the switch. Mm-hmm. And then over the last 5 or 6 years, MVNOs have risen to the fore, and the switch is now resident at the MVNO level. And then with technologies like SGP32, we now have the promise of agnostic switching. So the operators no longer control the switch, which is why everyone's scrambling for the effects of eSIM, because you can be switched out by an algorithm. But the point about AI is that it doesn't stop there, because what's happening is, just like the rest of IT, I think the answer to your question at the high level is IoT is catching up. Mm-hmm. Because 80% of applications and data is going to be processed at the edge, and when the edge is the device, and now you're talking about multi-RAT, so then what you have is the promise of an edge-centered switch. So for example, if you have an EV charger on the side of a house, if home Wi-Fi is available, if it can get through the brick before we release Halo, which will make it better, if Wi-Fi is available, then use that. If not, use cellular. It's a simple edge switch. But what about only use cellular if the signal strength meets this criteria and the latency meets that criteria? So that's not known in the cloud. It's known by the device. So you suddenly have a model that's the other way up, where if you think about all the different types of multi-RAT and all the different if-then-else combinations, you're making decisions based on very low-level network data that can only be measured at the device. And by the way, if you've got 10 million devices, you're talking 10 million. It's a mathematical problem with 10 million equations. Mm-hmm. And so I think AI will be the way in which the switch will be enabled at the edge. So when release 17 comes along, talked about satellite, and the prices, most importantly, come down, that's the issue. Then, and with all the new types of connectivity that are coming, and I mentioned Halo and Amazon Sidewalk in the US and whatever, the switch is moving to the edge. And wherever like a virtualized switch, wherever the switch is where the control point is.
Okay.
So it won't be at the MNO. That game is now clearly changing in front of our eyes. But it won't be at the MVNO. It'll be in the device, and that's the role that AI will play.
Okay. So we have run out of time. I wanted to get more information from the panel, but let's see if there's any questions from the audience on what we covered today. No questions. Everything is all clear to you folks, huh? Well, it's good, because it means you're ready to embark on your IoT journeys. And if you are, every single person on this stage is here to help you and enable you to get there in a way that's efficient and a lot faster, and most importantly, ensure that you make money out of it. So I would like to thank you all for trying to put context into a very complex subject matter in a very short time period. Jimmy, Roberta, Nick, Gabriel, Shri, I immensely appreciate and thank you for being here with us today. If you folks come up with any questions afterwards, come and see us. Thank you so much. Thank you.